Hello everyone. In today's video, we're going to be exploring the topic of emotional intelligence. We're going to be talking about what is emotional intelligence, how you can develop emotional intelligence, and I'm also going to be reacting to a video, a scenario I believe embodied emotional intelligence. We're also going to be exploring a biblical context. Be sure to stick around until the end of this video. Let's go ahead and jump right in. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Stefania. Over here on this channel, I upload videos about faith, personal growth and development. I upload recipe videos as well as lifestyle vlogs. So a little bit of everything, and every now and then I love to film sit-down videos. One of the pillars of this channel is personal growth. And two ways I believe that we can grow personally in our lives is by personal accountability and new knowledge. And I love to share the things that I'm learning as far as it relates to personal growth and development. This happens to be one of the topics that is close to home for me. It is an area that I've had to grow in my adult life, and a skill that I believe we all need as a society. So, what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is the ability to manage your own emotions and understand the emotions of people around you. And as Daniel Goleman puts it, emotional intelligence is just as important as your IQ. And how I like to put it, I believe that we need the fruit of the Spirit, which is self-control, to truly master emotional intelligence. This is an area that I have absolutely fallen short in. I come from a background of hardness, just being very hard. Exteriorly, I'm Haitian. Culturally, so we do not wear our emotions on our sleeves. We're very hard and very slow to show any emotions. And so I grew up in that context, and I think that's why I have a kind of sort of like thick skin and I'm very headstrong in a way. But I also realize that in any area of extreme that you may find yourself in as it relates to your emotions, I think it's bad to be the person who suppresses your emotions and rarely ever allows yourself to feel. And I think it's equally as bad if you are led and controlled by your emotions. So the video I'm going to be reacting to is by Vivek Ramsaway, and he is a former presidential candidate, and he had one of these videos on his site. They were discussing a topic. I think it was sort of like a town hall meeting, and a young lady was there and she was objecting to some of what he was saying, and I think that he exemplified emotional intelligence on a whole other level. So let's go ahead and jump into that clip now.
I'm going to sit across the table from Xi Jinping. Give me the hard questions.
LGBTQ.
What's up?
You heard me?
I actually didn't.
LGBTQ.
Yep, what about it?
Yeah, you just said there was nothing about transgender.
Yeah, so how about this? I give you the mic, and we hear what you have to say. And then I'm going to answer you, and you'll hear what I have to say, what everybody else here has to say. Does that sound like a good deal?
I don't need a mic.
Yes.
I can speak louder.
Well, stand up, tell me your name, and state your question.
My name's Alexis Case, and I grew up here.
Okay.
In this town. LGBTQ is a serious situation in this world today. There are children that get bullied because they are gay, they're lesbian, they're transgender. I don't need that.
Okay, you're welcome to have it if you want.
I don't need it.
You're going to hear me give my answer, so I'll let you finish.
What is your stance on LGBTQ?
Good. Thank you for your question. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to go into a level of depth that I don't usually go into on a campaign trail, but I'm going to do it because you asked the question. And you deserve an answer. LGBTQIA, there's so many letters, they've just added a plus at the end. That's where we are now. What's going on? So the same movement, because if we're going to call that one thing, let's play it fair. The same movement that said that the sex of the person you're attracted to is hardwired on the day you're born. That was the premise of the gay rights movement, for it to count as a civil right. That movement is now saying that your own biological sex is totally fluid over the course of your life.
Hypocrites.
You can't believe both those things. Well, I think I'm going to get to a deeper say. That's where I was about a year or two ago, but I think there's something deeper going on, and I'll tell you what it is. So the same movement, and by the way, let's think about the women's rights movement in this country, which said there's many ways to be a woman. You can have long hair, short hair, you can wear a skirt, you can wear jeans. Now says that, oh, if actually you want to behave a certain way, that means you're a man. So I think that the hypocrisies go all the way down, and I'll tell you what's going on. You can't believe both of those things at the same time if you're operating according to principles of sheer logic. But you can if you're adopting a faith, a cult-like belief system. So, this is controversial for me to say, but I'm going to tell you what I think. I believe that transgenderism specifically is a mental health disorder. I believe it's a mental health condition.
Okay.
Nobody cares what they think.
Well, no. We're going to finish this. This is good. We have to have open conversation in this country. But I don't think the
Not a
compassionate
fucking
thing to do.
mental health disorder.
Well,
It's how they fucking feel.
well, let me. If I'm going to give you a chance to respond if you'd like, but
Let me just say, I've noticed a pattern when it comes to these debates and these conversations as it relates to social issues, and when you have someone who is more conservative speaking to someone who is more liberal. I've noticed a pattern in how they communicate is very aggressive and like very angry. I have yet, it's probably out there, but I have yet to come across a video where I see someone who is more conservative respond in ways that I've seen a lot of people who consider themselves liberal respond. And this is coming from someone who would not have considered themselves political before this election. But I started to realize a lot of the social issues that we have in our society, when you're someone who genuinely cares about people other than yourself, you get wrapped up into it. So indirectly, I felt like I got lumped into this because of the genuine heart that I have for people and also children that I'm gonna have one day. So that's just something that I've observed, and let's get back to it.
This country, if we're not able to state our views,
That's how they feel.
That's how they feel. And you know what? I'll tell you a story, and you deserve to hear this. I met two young women in this race about 6 months ago. Their names were Chloe and Katie, two young women. They're in their 20s now. Both of them had their breasts cut off. One of them had her uterus removed.
Okay.
They're in their 20s. They regret that decision. One of them wants to have kids. She'll never have kids. The other one will never breastfeed her children. They'll never be the same because they had that done to them when they were teenagers. So no, when a young person shows up and says, my gender doesn't match my biological sex, they're asking for help.
But you just said 20. That's not teenage.
They happened to them when one girl was 13 when it happened to her. She's in her 20s now and regrets it. This is what's wrong in this country. We will look back at this and say this was barbaric that we allowed this to happen in this country. That is not compassion. That is cruelty. And so I don't think the right thing to do is, I'm not going to villainize those people. You don't villainize people who are going through suffering, but you have to be willing to say when a kid shows up and says, my gender doesn't match my biological sex, you have to be able to say, what else is going wrong at home? What else might be going wrong at school? Get to the bottom of what's going on. Help that person with compassion, with dignity. So my view is this: if you're an adult, you're free to live your life however you want as long as you're not hurting somebody else. If you're a man, you can dress how you want. If you're a woman, you can dress how you want. Identify how you want. We're a free country and I'm not going to stop you. But kids are not the same as adults. And we have to protect our children. And I'm going to go further than that. We can't change the way that women and men compete in sports. We can't do that. We can allow you to live your life the way you want to. But we can't change the way that we operate in our own life. And I'm going to finish this thought and then you get to respond. Because I think this is good. We don't do this enough. Open debate. I love this. I think what we've had in our country before is a tyranny of the majority. And that's what we worry about. But right now we don't have a tyranny of the majority. What we have in this country right now is a tyranny of the minority. That's what we have right now, a tyranny of the fringe minority that tells you to shut up, sit down, and do as you're told. No, we have to stand for what is true. And so I promise to you, you will have a chance to respond. I'm going to keep my promise. You tell me. This is good. We don't do this enough in our country anymore. Open conversation. Tell me.
I was a child when I knew that I was gay. Not the fact that I wanted to change my gender, but living here in this town, I knew that I wanted, that I was a lesbian, that I was attracted to females.
And you know what's...
But I had to hide it.
And when did you grow? When was that? In the 90s?
Oh, no. Let's see, I came out when I was 19, so I was born in 1983.
So I think where we are now, we're in the similar generation. I think things today aren't what they were. I grew up in Ohio in the 1990s, and we're in a different place today. And I think this could be a very productive conversation. I don't get to do this in the campaign trail often, where we all are in our own echo chambers and silos. So it's good for us to talk to each other. I like that. Something funny's happened, I think, in the last few years in this country with the civil rights movement. It's right when we get to closest to the promised land of true racial equality that we then start obsessing over systemic racism. It's right when we get to the point in our national history where whoever you are, you can marry who you want, where you want, if you want, whatever gender they are, that we start then obsessing over the sexual identity revolution. You know what's actually funny right now is many people who are lesbian or gay are being taught to say that, hey, if you're a woman attracted to a woman, you're not a woman, you're a man. So that's the transgender movement. The L and the G, first of all, don't have that much to do with each other. The G and the T don't have as much to do with each other. But we're clubbing all of these things up to create more division. I hate the term persons of color. You want to know why? You take 100 different cultures, combine them into one thing that's designed to be opposed to this other thing we call white. And so the way I view this is, you are free to live your life the way you wish to, as long as you don't hurt anybody else in return. And I'm free to do the same thing too. But that doesn't mean we change the way men and women compete in sports. That doesn't mean we change the way men and women... I don't think that just because you identify as a man doesn't mean that you're entitled to a trophy. Do you agree with me on that?
That's different.
You agree with me on that?
I get you.
You agree with me on that? All right.
That's different.
Because men shouldn't be swimming with women in women's sports competitions. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's
different.
That's what I'm talking about, right?
That's
And so that's what I'm saying is it's not all the same thing, right? And so we got to respect people and treat them with dignity. Every one of us is different. But all I'll say is kids aren't the same as adults. And if we can agree on that, then I think we at least made some progress tonight and we'll have a step forward. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, so first, I think he did a couple of things. I think he did a really great job of regulating and controlling his emotions, even when the lady was yelling and insulting him. He did a really great job at not taking her aggression personally. I think that is the first thing that we can learn from this clip in terms of emotional intelligence. Most times when you're speaking to someone and you see like this really outward strong emotional reaction, most times it has nothing to do with you. Most times it has to do with the fact that you possibly triggered something that was already there within them. And I think that he does a really great job, and I've watched his other videos as well as Charlie Kirk. He did a really great job at not taking her aggression personally and then becoming defensive. That is a strong indication of emotional intelligence. One of the 5 components that Daniel Goleman mentions in his book and observation of emotional intelligence is being able to regulate your own emotions while also being aware of others' emotions as well. And I think he did a really great job, one against the whole crowd, in saying the truth in a way that, as you can tell towards the end, it disarmed her and she was able to receive his message and not be so offended. Another thing that I wanted to point out in terms of emotional intelligence, when you have certain negative experiences, stored trauma, or stored negative emotions from a topic, and you start debating about it or you start speaking about it, we have to do a better job at separating our own emotions and feelings from a topic to be able to think objectively and recognize truth as what it is. A lot of times what I'm seeing in society, what's happening is we have our stored emotions and stored trauma from our experiences, and we carry that over into how we see the world, how we vote, how we treat people. And I've addressed this previously in my other videos, but I think one of the main things that we should do once we've experienced something traumatic or something hurtful, we should seek healing. Once we seek healing, we can hear better. Because towards the end, she started seeing that he was making sense. No, a child who is 13 years old can't even drink, can't drive, can't get a tattoo, certainly cannot be able to make decisions about changing their gender. That's logic. The average person would agree, if you're not operating off of emotions or internalizing it as your own experiences, you can look outside of yourself and see, no, this is objectively true that a child should not be able to make that kind of decision based off of temporary feelings. And we're going to get into a story in the Bible I think really plays a part in all of this. Children should not be making such heavy decisions at such a young age based off of how they feel now. How many of you made decisions when you were 13, 14, now that you're an adult, you probably don't even remember or you probably regret. And it's absolutely insane. I can't believe that we even have these sort of conversations. That's just to show you where we have gone as a society, where logic doesn't matter anymore. Your emotions take the front seat and logic takes a back seat. And from my worldview, my perspective, I think that's no way to live. I think when we are driven by emotions, we are more susceptible to be manipulated. We are more inclined to make decisions that we'll later on regret because of a temporary emotion that we may feel in the moment. Your emotions are valid, but they're not always true. Just because you feel a certain way, I could feel like this is black. This is black. I feel like it's black. It looks black. It's black. It doesn't change the reality that this is gold. No matter how I feel about it, your feelings aren't always right. And when you live a life dictated by what you feel, you make poor decisions. Vivek did a really great job at reading the room, not only reading the room, but controlling the room in a way where he didn't get offended. He didn't lash back out at them. And he stood on truth in a way that was compassion first. And the way he humanized her, he didn't see her as a lesbian or anything like that. Just person to person. If we as a society are more open to have conversations outside of your labels, outside of your skin color, outside of your social class, if we're just willing to have conversations person to person, human to human, and put aside our own feelings and biases, I think we'll get really, really far. And this video was a true example of this. I think he displayed emotional intelligence on a whole other level And I think that we can learn a lot from this conversation. And to also add, I really love the fact that he did not allow her challenging him to cause him to back down from the truth. Even when we're in moments where we are the only person in the room who may feel opposite of what the whole crowd feels, I believe that emotional intelligence is still being able to stand on the truth while not backing down and not internalizing everyone else coming at you. I think that takes an incredibly strong, courageous person not to change their opinion or be swayed by the general population or general norm. Even if you're in the room and 10 people are screaming one thing and you have the courage to still stand on the truth and what's right, I think that is extremely courageous and bold, and we can learn a lot from that. And even as our society is shunning men and making it a women against men type of battle, we need strong men to embody that courage and that strength that it takes, that operates in that level of emotional intelligence. Now here we get to a biblical example of a lack of emotional intelligence. And I thought that this story was fitting because I think that we can learn a lot from this story. And this is about Joseph, who is the youngest of his brothers, and his brother's jealousy that ultimately led them to sell him into slavery. And his story begins in Genesis 37, starting at verse 1 through 36. Just to give some historical context about Joseph, Joseph is the son of Jacob and Rachel. And if you know anything about Jacob and Rachel's marriage, then you know that Rachel and Leah are the daughters of Laban. And Laban, their father, tricked Jacob into marrying Leah, the oldest, because at that time, and their customary was that the oldest daughter had to be married first, and the oldest son also gets the birthright for that time. But the father tricked Jacob into marrying Leah first, and when he discovered that he was tricked, he ended up working an additional 7 years for Rachel. And Rachel is the mother of Joseph, and Joseph is the 11th son of Jacob, but Rachel's first son because she couldn't have children, and he was the first son that Rachel had for Jacob. Leah had 10 other sons for Jacob, but Joseph was Jacob's favorite because he came from Rachel, which is the wife he actually wanted and was not tricked into marrying. So, from understanding Joseph and Jacob's history, I think that we start to see that you do reap what you sow, because Jacob is the same person who tricked his twin brother out of his inheritance. So we see that reaping what you sow and come back full circle even with his children. So starting at first Genesis 37 verse 1, Joseph's dream. Jacob lived in the land where his father stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the son of Bilhah and the sons of Zippah, his father's wives. And he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel, which is Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheep gathered around me and bowed down to it. His brothers said, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now, in verse 11, we see the emotion of jealousy coming from Joseph's brothers. And as a parent, it's not fair to express favoritism among siblings, because then you have this sibling rivalry between the siblings that makes one look inferior than the other. Joseph's father played a role in his brothers being jealous of him because of the special treatment that he gave Joseph as opposed to his other brothers. And remember, Joseph was the youngest, and it was customary for that time for the oldest to get special treatment and the father's inheritance. But we see Joseph, who is the youngest, getting treated differently than the other brothers. So I can understand that. I can understand how that would provoke jealousy. I mean, it's a human emotion that we all feel. We all have been jealous from time to time. But the reason why I felt that this story was a really, really great example and what we can learn from is what the brothers do with that emotion of jealousy. So, starting at verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. So he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, what are you looking for? He replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks? They had moved on from here. The man answered, I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached, they plotted to kill him. So we see that emotion of jealousy turn deadly. We see that unchecked emotion of jealousy led them to plot to kill their own brother, their flesh and blood, because of their jealousy. Here comes the dreamer, they said to him. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. You see how much plotting they do? Oh my Lord. You gotta love the Bible. The Bible, and man, I tell you. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Just one of them. That's just one of the brothers. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it, As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." You guys see how far that unchecked emotion of jealousy led them? You see how much plotting and scheming and covering up they had to do because of that emotion of jealousy. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. One thing the Bible will do is show you real life. And it's funny how the book of Ecclesiastes says that there is nothing new under the sun. So when we see things going on in families and one turning against the other because one is more successful or anything like that, it happened in the Bible. It happened before, and it's just history repeating itself. So I highlighted 3 lessons that we can learn from the story of Joseph and his brother. First one is, when we fail to manage our emotions, those emotions will control us and influence our behavior. And we see that from the time that Joseph shared his dreams with his brothers and them witnessing how Jacob loved him more than the rest of them, we see that emotion of jealousy not being managed, not being checked. And because of that, they were driven by that jealousy. It led them to plot first to kill him. And when they decided not to kill him, they decided to throw him down in a cistern. Then ultimately led them to sell him into slavery. We see just how progressive our emotions can become when we allow them to rule and dictate our life. We are supposed to be in control of our emotions. We shouldn't allow our emotions to run and rule our lives, so much so that we make decisions based off of how we feel. And if we have a society of people who make decisions solely based off of how they feel, where are we gonna be in 20 years, 30 years from now? Where are our children going to be as a society if we allow our emotions to dictate our behaviors? And we see from the historical biblical account here how far your emotions can lead you if you allow them to run your life. The second thing I believe we learn from the story of Joseph here is making permanent decisions based off of temporary emotions will lead to consequences. So, because they decided to sell their brother into slavery because of their jealousy, you see that they caused great pain to their father. And they also caused, which they probably did not plan, Joseph was sold into slavery and then went to prison. If you follow the rest of the story of Joseph through Genesis 37 through 50, you see all of what Joseph went through because his brothers sold him into slavery, which ultimately God used it for good because he became a king. So, but I think this truth still remains. Some decisions you can't come back from them. And some decisions have bigger consequences than the other. And if we go back to the story that Vivek shared during that town hall meeting, those 13-year-old women who decided to go under gender affirming care at the age of 13, now they regret that decision because it was based off a temporary emotion that they were feeling in the moment. Now imagine if they had an adult in their life who held them accountable and helped guide them through that. I believe that we would go further as a society if we stopped looking for quick fix and if we really dealt with the issues that are underneath. And the third lesson I believe we can take from Joseph and his brothers is that lack of emotional regulation may cause irrational and illogical thinking. So if we go back to I believe it was verse 11. This was after Joseph told them about his dream and they started plotting on him. And they started saying, no, maybe we should kill him. No, maybe we shouldn't kill him. He's still our brother. Can you imagine plotting to kill your own brother? Like, what has to drive you to that point of that irrational thinking, just thinking out of this world that you have to get rid of your brother because of your jealousy? They made it to where they actually believed that this was a solution. How different is that than today? Than what we see children experiencing gender dysphoria, and they believe the solution is changing their gender. And when they do change it, there's been multiple people who have come out and shared, hey, this is not what I needed. This was not the solution. And because of those emotions or those feelings that went unchecked or unregulated, it caused the irrational thinking of, I need to change my gender. I need to do this. But that's not really the issue. Why is emotional intelligence important? Emotional intelligence is a skill that can help improve relationships, our society as a whole. I believe that I've learned a few things as it relates to emotional intelligence, regulating my emotions, me being a woman. Most times as women, we have more trouble in this area than men in terms of regulating our emotions and thinking with our head and not with our hearts. We see this even in relationships with women who stay with men longer than they should because of how they feel, but not looking at the reality for what it is and seeing the facts that are right there, but allowing their heart to lead them. And that's why I believe the scripture tells us that we should guard our hearts, because out of it flows the issue of life. Because we see that a lot of things come from your heart. A lot of things come from those emotions when we don't regulate them, and it causes our lives to spiral if we don't know how to regulate our emotions. How can you develop emotional intelligence? these are some of the tips that I got from Daniel Coleman. So big shout out to him. First thing is to recognize your emotions. I think that this is also a part of self-care in terms of the 5 steps that he lists here when it comes to emotional intelligence and emotional regulation. And this is something that you can also do in your head. Let's say you're speaking with someone and you're getting frustrated. It's reasonable to acknowledge, even if you don't do it out loud, hey, I'm frustrated. Like, this conversation is really frustrating me right now. Let's take a 5-minute break because I don't want to say nothing that I'm gonna regret, because I'm liable to do that. Second thing that Daniel Coleman lists is the ability to understand your emotions. So first, recognizing it and just being self-aware to understand and assess your own emotions. And then he says it's the ability to understand them, which helps us process them. Because once we recognize the emotion is there, and once we can understand them, that helps us process our emotions. And if you're in the situation of, let's say you're speaking to someone at a town hall meeting or any outdoor discussion, you don't want to be the only person in the room who's driven by emotions. Then you aren't really heard because your emotions took over and you lost the whole debate because of not being able to process your emotions. Third component he lists here is to regulate your emotions, which I believe goes hand in hand with processing your emotions. And then he says to number 4, effectively express your emotions. So once you recognize them, once you understand them, once you've processed them, you can express them. Like, say for example, you're having a conversation with someone and you're getting really upset. Instead of screaming at them, cursing them out and like, hey, you're an idiot, da 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 da, all this that comes when you're triggered. I think that this flow chart allows us to recognize, okay, I'm getting upset. You're getting me mad. You're not understanding me. I feel like I'm talking to a wall. I'm angry right now. So I would rather we talk about this at another time as opposed to being insulting and all of these things that come when we're triggered. And that is what I think will help us move forward as a society. A lot of these videos that I'm seeing in terms of discussions on the liberal, on the conservative side, I think a huge component that many liberals and some conservatives, we're not all perfect, could learn is emotional regulation. And that is something that I want to make sure that I teach my children, because it allows you to be understood when you're someone who can regulate your own emotions and not be led by them. A lot of these debates that I'm seeing, most times I'm seeing people that are hurt from their own experiences, from their own trauma, and they lash out against someone who's trying to bring knowledge and light and facts. Not emotion based, but just facts. A man can't be a woman. That's a fact. And I don't understand why that is so triggering. I don't understand how we got so far to the point where logic and facts are offensive. We will do well as a society if we sat down and processed our emotions and truly took the time to understand ourselves and our traumatic experiences and what we've been through, and not project them on other people, because the vast majority of the people you meet are not seeking to hurt you. And if you can really learn to regulate your emotions, you can probably hear the truth a lot more clearly. So that's just what I've observed, and I definitely will also leave some resources down below. I was listening to a podcast by Dr. Allison Cook, and I think that she did a really great job at breaking down emotional intelligence. I'll also share the link to Daniel Coleman's book on emotional intelligence, and as well as some other resources down in my description box. That is the end of the video today, y'all. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like the video. I'll definitely be back with more videos like this. Until next time, love you guys. Bye.